In 1971, a shipping container full of Taiwanese televisions left the port of Kaohsiung. It took 28 days to cross the Pacific. 28 days for the physical object to move from one side of the world to the other. That same year, a currency speculator in London made a phone call. In 4 minutes, he had moved the equivalent of $40 million across 3 continents. No container, no ship, no ocean, just a phone and a belief. Here's a question that economists spend careers trying not to answer directly. If money is supposed to represent real things, goods, labor, value, why does it move 1,000 times faster than those things ever could? And what happens to an economy when the symbol starts lapping the thing it is supposed to symbolize? That is what this video is about. Let us start with something almost embarrassingly simple. Imagine you grow wheat. Your wheat takes 6 months to grow. It takes 3 days to harvest, it takes 2 weeks to get to market, and once it gets there, it sells in an afternoon. Now imagine you own a futures contract on wheat. That contract can change hands 40 times in a single trading day. The wheat has not moved. The wheat does not care. The wheat is still sitting in Kansas being wheat. But the financial claim on that wheat, the piece of paper, or really the entry in a database, has traveled the world. This gap is not new. It is not a glitch. It is not the result of rogue bankers or reckless algorithms, though those things exist. This gap is structural. It is baked into how modern economies are designed. And most people, including a lot of people who work in finance, have never really sat down and thought about why. So let us think about it. To understand why money moves faster than goods, you need to understand 3 things. First, what money actually is, not what they taught you in school, but what it actually is. Second, how the system that moves money was designed and for whose benefit. And third, what happens at the edges, when the speed differential gets too large, when the gap between financial reality and physical reality becomes, for lack of a better word, insane. We'll get to the edges, but first, the foundation. For most of human history, money was a thing. Gold, silver, grain, shells, salt. In some cultures, literally cattle. The thing about a thing is that it moves at the speed of things. You could not wire gold across the Atlantic in 1850. You had to put it on a ship that might sink. Which is why people built elaborate systems to avoid having to move gold at all, to move promises instead. A bill of exchange, a letter of credit. You deposit gold with a merchant bank in London. They give you a piece of paper. You take that paper to New York. A bank in New York reads the paper, verifies the signature, and gives you access to funds. The gold never moved. The paper did. This is the first great insight of monetary history. The moment you separate the claim from the thing, the claim can move at a completely different speed. By the early 20th century, most wealthy economies had figured out that you did not even need the gold in the vault. You needed people to believe there was gold in the vault, which is a subtle but extremely important distinction. Because once you are operating on belief, the physics change. In 1971, and yes, we are back to 1971, because the whole modern financial system hinges on this moment, the United States government made it official. President Nixon closed the gold window. Foreign governments could no longer exchange their dollars for gold at the Federal Reserve. The dollar became, in the technical term, a fiat currency. Money backed not by a physical commodity, but by governmental authority and collective trust. The mainstream framing of this decision goes something like, well, we needed more flexibility to manage the modern economy. And that is true. But here's the version they don't put in the textbooks. When you remove the physical anchor, you remove the physical speed limit. Before 1971, money, in a rough sense, was still tethered to something that lived in the physical world. Gold could not teleport. It could not be duplicated with a keystroke. After 1971, money became pure information. And information? Information moves at the speed of light. Not metaphorically, literally. Today, the financial industry spends billions of dollars shaving microseconds off the time it takes to send a signal between New York and Chicago. There's a company that literally built a straighter fiber optic cable carving through mountains just to reduce transmission time by 4 milliseconds. 4 milliseconds, that's not a rounding error. In high-frequency trading, 4 milliseconds is the difference between profit and loss. Meanwhile, the tomatoes in California still take 2 weeks to reach New York. The tomatoes are not getting faster. They were never going to get faster. Tomatoes have physics. Money increasingly does not. Okay, so money is information. It moves fast. But how? What is the actual machinery? Let's walk through what happens when a large bank wants to move $1 billion. Not $1 billion in cash. No one moves cash. $1 billion as an entry in a ledger. The bank sends an instruction through a network called SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. SWIFT does not actually move money. It moves messages. It tells other banks what to do. The receiving bank gets the message, checks its records, updates its ledger. Done. If both banks hold accounts at the Federal Reserve or the equivalent central bank in their country, the actual settlement happens there. The Fed debits one account, credits another. 2 numbers change. That is $1 billion moving. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Most transactions never touch a central bank at all. When you pay for groceries with your debit card, your bank and the grocery store's bank exchange messages. They update internal records. At the end of the day or the week, they net out their obligations. Your bank might owe the store's bank a net of $40,000 after millions of tiny transactions cancel each other out. Then they settle that once. This is called netting, and it is one of the reasons the financial system can handle an almost incomprehensible volume of transactions. You do not actually move money for every transaction. You keep score. You settle later. Now, scale this up. The global foreign exchange market trades roughly $7.5 trillion per day, every day. That number is so large it requires a moment of stillness. $7.5 trillion. The entire annual economic output of Japan is about $4 trillion. The Forex market moves more than that every 2 days. And here's the thing to understand about that 7.5 trillion figure. Most of it has nothing to do with actual trade in goods and services. The Bank for International Settlements estimates that somewhere between 3 and 5% of daily Forex volume is related to real cross-border commerce, companies actually paying for things in other currencies. The rest is financial activity, trading, speculation, hedging, derivatives on derivatives. The financial system has not just outpaced the real economy, it has lapped it multiple times. And here's something worth pausing on. That excess velocity, that 95+% of financial activity that is not directly tied to real goods and services, is not free. Someone is paying for it, somewhere. We'll come back to that, but first, let's talk about why the system was designed this way. Because it was designed this way, it didn't happen by accident. After World War II, the major Western economies sat down at Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, beautiful place, terrible irony, and designed the post-war financial order. Fixed exchange rates, the dollar pegged to gold, other currencies pegged to the dollar. Stable, predictable, slow. By the late 1970s, that system was gone. Exchange rates floated. Capital could move freely across borders. The financial industry lobbied hard for this, and they got it. The argument was, free capital movement makes markets more efficient. Money flows where it is needed most. Everybody wins. The counter-argument, which was made at the time by economists who are now largely forgotten, was if you let capital move at any speed without friction, you create instability. You create the conditions for money to race around the world in search of returns, disconnected from anything real, and periodically crash into things. Guess which side won the argument? Here is where the math starts to feel a little uncomfortable. The global derivatives market, contracts whose value is derived from other assets, currencies, interest rates, commodities, has a notional value of somewhere around $1 quadrillion. 1 quadrillion. That is a 1 with 15 zeros behind it. The entire global GDP, everything humanity produces in a year, every country, every industry, is roughly $100 trillion. The derivatives market is 10 times that, at a minimum. Now, to be fair, and we should be fair here, notional value is not the same as actual exposure. Most of these contracts offset each other. The real risk in the system is much smaller. But that framing contains its own uncomfortable truth. The financial system has become so large, so layered, and so fast that the people running it can only manage it through approximation. They can tell you the notional value of everything. They cannot tell you exactly what would happen if a significant portion of it moved in the wrong direction simultaneously, because it has never happened at the scale the current system would allow. We got a preview in 2008. The subprime mortgage crisis is usually framed as a story about greed. Banks gave loans to people who could not pay them back. Investors bought securities built on those loans without understanding the risk. Regulators looked the other way. All true. But there is a structural story underneath the human story. A house in Phoenix takes 2 years to build. It takes a week to sell. The mortgage on that house takes 30 years to pay off. The financial instruments built on top of that mortgage, the mortgage-backed securities, the collateralized debt obligations, the synthetic CDOs, the credit default swaps on the synthetic CDOs, those instruments could be created, sliced, repackaged, and sold in minutes. The house was slow. The claim on the house was fast, and the claims on the claims on the claims were blinding. When the underlying asset, the house, stopped performing, the speed of the financial system worked against everyone. Investors tried to get out simultaneously, prices moved faster than anyone could assess actual risk, markets that were supposed to be liquid became frozen overnight. Not because anyone did anything illegal in that specific moment, but because the system had been optimized for speed, and speed does not discriminate between good information and bad information. It just moves. About 8 million Americans lost their jobs. 10 million lost their homes. The financial system recovered in about 4 years. Many of those families never fully did. There is a ratio worth sitting with. The ratio between how fast the money moved and how slow the consequences moved for the people affected by it. Microseconds to create the conditions. Years, sometimes decades, to live inside them. The standard defense of financial speed goes something like this. Fast, efficient capital markets allow companies to raise money cheaply. That means they can invest more, hire more, innovate more. The whole economy benefits. The high-frequency traders and the currency speculators, annoying as they might seem, are actually providing liquidity. They are making it easier and cheaper for real businesses to operate. There's truth in this. There is also a great deal of faith dressed up as analysis. Consider what actually happened to capital allocation after financial deregulation kicked into high gear in the 1980s. Corporate investment in plants and equipment, the physical stuff of the real economy, as a share of GDP, did not increase. It stagnated and in some periods declined. What did increase was share buybacks, dividend payments, financial engineering. Companies using cheap capital not to build things, but to inflate their own stock price. The theory said faster capital would flow toward productive investment. The data suggests it flowed toward financial returns. which is, when you think about it, exactly what you would expect. If you build a system that rewards speed and penalizes delay, and most real-world investment requires delay, building factories, training workers, developing products, then fast money is going to tend to avoid those things. A factory takes 3 years to build and 10 years to pay off. A share buyback can boost earnings per share within a quarter. Given those options, what does a CEO whose bonus is tied to quarterly stock performance choose? Right. This is not a story about evil executives, though some of those exist too. It is a story about incentive structures. When you build a world where fast money wins, the people in that world optimize for fast money. It is rational behavior inside an irrational system. Or maybe the system is rational and our expectations of it are irrational, depending on who you ask. Here's the larger thing. Economies need 2 things to function. They need a financial system to allocate resources and manage risk, and they need a real economy, people, machines, land, energy, to actually produce things. These 2 systems have always been connected. The financial system is supposed to serve the real economy. That was the theory. That is still the theory taught in every economics department on Earth. But over the past 50 years, the financial system has grown so large, so complex, and so fast that the relationship between the 2 has become, to use the technical term, weird. Global financial assets, stocks, bonds, bank deposits, derivatives, are now worth somewhere between 5 and 10 times global GDP. The finance sector in the United States has roughly doubled its share of the economy since 1980, while employing only a small fraction of the workforce. The financial tail is, in a meaningful sense, wagging the economic dog. And the speed differential is part of why. Because when financial claims on real things move faster than the real things themselves, you create the conditions for persistent mispricing. The financial system says a thing is worth X. The real world says that thing is worth Y. Sometimes those numbers converge relatively quickly through what economists call price discovery. But sometimes they do not for years. Sometimes they converge violently. Sometimes the process of convergence destroys value, jobs, and livelihoods on a massive scale. Housing prices in 2006, tech valuations in 1999, emerging market currencies in 1997, all cases where fast money ran so far ahead of the underlying reality that the correction was not gradual, it was a collapse. And each time, the recovery for the financial system was measured in months. The recovery for the people living in the actual economy was measured in years. There's a concept in physics called resonance. When a system is driven at a frequency it cannot absorb, it breaks. Bridges have collapsed this way. Mechanical systems have torn themselves apart, not because they were weak, because the driving force was moving at the wrong frequency. You can think of the speed differential between money and goods as a kind of economic resonance problem. The financial system drives the real economy at frequencies the real economy was not built to handle, and every so often, something breaks. This is not a radical take. The Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks, has been publishing variations on this concern for 30 years. The IMF has flagged it repeatedly. Mainstream economists who cannot be dismissed as ideologues have written extensively about what they call financialization and its costs. The problem is that the people who most benefit from the current arrangement are also the people with the most influence over the current arrangement, which is, historically, not a recipe for reform.
So, back to 1971. Back to the shipping container crossing the Pacific in 28 days, and the phone call that moved $40 million in 4 minutes. That gap has not closed. It has widened. Every technological improvement in the financial system, faster networks, algorithmic trading, real-time settlement, has accelerated the money side of the equation. The good side has improved too, but modestly. Container ships are slightly faster. Logistics are more efficient, but they are still subject to weather and fuel and labor and the uncomfortable fact that physical objects have to cross physical space. The question worth sitting with is not whether this gap will ever close. It will not. The laws of physics are not going to change to accommodate a trading desk in Connecticut. The question is whether the gap becomes a feature or a flaw. For the people who move money fast, it is obviously a feature. For the people who make and grow and build things, and for the people whose livelihoods depend on the stability of the system those things live inside, the answer is considerably less obvious. And maybe that is the thing. We built a financial system that is extraordinary at moving abstract claims at extraordinary speed. We are still figuring out whether that is the same thing as building a good economy. Picture a shipping container. 40 feet long, 8 feet wide. Steel walls painted a fading shade of red that has been battered by salt and sun. Inside, secured to wooden pallets with nylon strapping, wrapped in foam, packed into cardboard boxes, 340 Taiwanese-made televisions. Each one manufactured by workers earning wages that would have seemed impossibly low in the country where those televisions would eventually be sold. Each one destined to sit in a living room in the American Midwest and display images of a world its new owner would never personally visit. The container is loaded at the port of Kaohsiung, Taiwan, on a Tuesday morning in October 1971. It will arrive in Long Beach, California in 28 days. Not because the ship is slow. By the standards of the era, it is actually a reasonably fast vessel. It will average about 18 knots on the open ocean. It will run through 2 minor storms and arrive 2 days behind its original schedule because of a queue at the port of Long Beach. 28 days because the Pacific Ocean is 8,000 miles wide. And nothing, not ambition, not urgency, not any amount of money in any currency can compress those 8,000 miles into something smaller than they are. Physics does not negotiate. Oceans do not move to accommodate schedules. The container moves at the speed of the world. That is the only speed available to it. Now, same year, different story entirely. A currency trader at a desk in London picks up a telephone. He speaks to a counterpart in Zurich. He speaks to another in New York. He executes a series of linked foreign exchange transactions across 3 different currency pairs using a combination of spot trades and short-dated forwards. He is operating on information about a coming policy change at a European central bank. Information that is not yet public, but that he has, through careful research and the kind of relationships that exist only in the tight world of 1970s currency markets, been able to anticipate. In 4 minutes and 20 seconds, the equivalent of $40 million has moved across 3 continents. No container, no ship, no ocean, no pallets, no strapping, no cardboard boxes, no 28 days. Just a telephone, a series of agreements between institutions, and a collective decision by several very large banks to believe that the numbers in their ledgers mean what they say they mean. Here is the question that this video is going to spend the next 30 minutes examining. If money is supposed to represent real things, goods, labor, resources, value, the fruits of human effort and ingenuity, why does it move 1,000 times faster than those things ever could? Why does the representation travel at the speed of light, while the thing being represented travels at the speed of wind and ocean current? And more importantly, what happens to an economy, to a society, when the symbol gets so far ahead of the thing it symbolizes that the two begin to lose their relationship with each other entirely? What happens when the map is so much faster than the territory that the map starts to feel like the territory? When the claim on the thing seems more real, more tradable, more valuable than the thing itself? These are not abstract philosophical puzzles. They are not the kind of questions that only matter to academics and central bankers. They have consequences that show up in your mortgage rate and your employment situation and the price of your groceries and the stability of your retirement savings. The gap between financial speed and real-world speed is one of the most consequential structural features of modern economic life, and most people,
including many people who work in finance, have never really sat down and traced where it came from, why it exists, and what it is doing to the economies it operates inside. So that is what we are going to do. We are going to go back to the beginning. We are going to trace the moment the split first appeared between money and the things money represents. We are going to follow that split across centuries, watching it widen. We are going to look at the machinery of the modern financial system and understand exactly how it achieves the speeds it achieves. We are going to sit with some numbers that are frankly difficult to process. And we are going to think carefully about what those numbers mean for the people who live inside the economy rather than the people who trade it. By the time this video ends, you will not be surprised by financial crises. You will understand why they are not accidents, not anomalies, not the result of a few bad actors making rogue decisions. You will understand why they are the predictable, recurring output of a system that was designed to move fast inside a world that was built to move slowly. To understand what is happening right now in the modern financial system, you have to go back to the moment the split first happened. Not 1971, much earlier than that. Go back roughly 4,000 years to the sun-baked markets of ancient Mesopotamia, to the city of Ur in what is now southern Iraq along the banks of the Euphrates River. A farmer has surplus barley, more than he can consume, more than his family needs, more than his animals require. He wants to trade it for bronze tools. The man with the bronze tools does not need barley right now. His stores are adequate. He will need barley in 4 months when the dry season has drawn down his supplies and the new harvest is still weeks away. In a simple barter economy, this transaction cannot happen. The farmer has something now that the toolmaker will need later. The toolmaker has something now that the farmer needs now. The timings do not line up. The trade fails. But these are not simple people. These are Mesopotamians. They have been building cities, managing irrigation systems, and running complex agricultural bureaucracies for 1,000 years. They know how to solve this problem. The farmer and the toolmaker make an agreement. The farmer receives the bronze tools today. He gives the toolmaker a clay tablet, a small piece of fired clay inscribed with a quantity of barley and a future date. The tablet says, in the cuneiform writing of the era, at the spring harvest, the bearer of this tablet may claim 40 measures of barley from the farm of such and such, son of such and such, in the district of such and such. The toolmaker takes the tablet. The farmer takes the tools. The barley itself has not moved. It is still in the ground, not yet planted, not yet grown, not yet harvested. It will not exist as a physical thing in the world for another 6 months. But the claim on the barley has moved. It has traveled from the farmer's hand to the toolmaker's hand. And here is the crucial thing. Once the claim is in the toolmaker's hand, it can travel further. If the toolmaker needs his capital before the spring harvest, he can sell the clay tablet to the copper merchant. The tablet can move through the market entirely independently of the barley it represents. The barley moves at the speed of agriculture, seasons, weather, soil, sunlight. The claim on the barley moves at the speed of human agreement. This is the original split. This small clay tablet in a Mesopotamian market 4,000 years ago is the ancestor of every bond, every derivative, every currency, every number in every bank's computer system in the world today. The entire architecture of modern finance descends from this moment, the decision to separate the claim from the thing and let each travel at its own speed. For most of the following 4,000 years, the gap between the claim and the thing remained relatively small. Because the claims were specific, they were local, they referred to particular goods held by particular people in particular places. The clay tablet's value was completely and directly tied to the barley. If the barley failed, drought, blight, flood, the tablet was worthless. The claim and the thing were in constant contact. The gap started to widen as trade expanded, as markets grew larger, as the distance between buyer and seller increased, as the goods being traded became more varied, more complex, and more removed from simple agricultural output. When Venetian merchants began financing long-distance maritime trade in the 12th and 13th centuries, something new emerged. A merchant in Venice could advance a loan to a ship captain setting off to Alexandria or Constantinople. The captain would use the money to purchase spices, silk, and dyes. He would return to Venice, sell the goods, and repay the loan with interest. The ship took months to travel, 14 weeks round trip under reasonable conditions, more if the weather was poor or the ports were congested. But the loan agreement, the piece of parchment describing the terms of the transaction and assigning the commercial risk, could change hands in a day. If the original lender needed his capital back before the ship returned, he could sell the agreement to another investor. That investor could sell it again. The right to the profits from a voyage not yet complete was already circulating through the merchant community of Venice, while the actual goods were still floating somewhere in the Adriatic or loaded in a warehouse in Alexandria. The goods moved at the speed of wind and oar. The claims on the goods moved at the speed of conversation and trust.
By the 17th century, the technology of financial claims had become genuinely sophisticated, and the gap between financial speed and physical speed had grown to the point where it was generating its first major casualties. The Amsterdam Stock Exchange, founded in 1602, allowed investors to buy and sell shares in the Dutch East India Company, the VOC, while the company's ships were still at sea. You could own a fraction of a fleet you had never seen, in an ocean you might never visit, carrying goods from places that most Europeans could not find on a map. You had no physical contact with any aspect of the business. You just held a piece of paper that said you owned a fraction of the profits. The VOC ships traveled at about 4 to 5 knots on a good day. The voyage from Amsterdam to Batavia, what is now Jakarta in Indonesia, took approximately 3 to 4 months each way. Round trip with time in port, the voyage lasted well over a year. VOC shares changed hands multiple times a day on the Amsterdam Exchange. And then, because humans are reliably humans in every century, traders discovered something. You did not have to own the shares to trade them. You could sell shares you did not have, betting they would fall in price, and then buy them later to close your position at a profit. This is short selling. It is 400 years old. The Dutch government tried to ban it in 1610. The traders ignored the ban. This is also a 400-year-old tradition. You could also buy and sell options, contracts giving you the right but not the obligation to purchase or sell shares at a specific date on a future date. Options trading in Amsterdam in the late 1600s on a market for shares in ships not yet returned from voyages, not yet complete. The financial system was already doing things that the underlying assets could not possibly keep up with. And it was already generating its first great crisis, tulip mania, 1636 to 1637. Contracts for tulip bulbs, not the bulbs themselves, but the right to purchase tulips not yet grown at prices set today for delivery in the future, were trading at prices that had no connection to any rational assessment of what a tulip bulb was worth. At the peak, a single rare bulb variety commanded a price equivalent to several times the annual income of a skilled craftsman. Buyers were not buying tulips. They were buying contracts on tulips, claims on claims, speed on speed. When confidence cracked in February 1637, the market for tulip contracts collapsed within days. The financial damage was real, the confusion and anger were real, and the tulips themselves, still in the ground across the Netherlands, perfectly healthy, indifferent to the chaos their names had caused, were absolutely fine. The tulips did not care. The claims on the tulips had a catastrophic week.
At this point in the video, we need to be very clear about something that most people think they understand but actually do not. What is money? Not in the loose cultural sense, not money as a symbol of security or freedom or success. In the specific, mechanical, operational sense. What is the substance of it? What are you actually holding when you hold money? Most people, if you ask them, will give you a version of money is a medium of exchange. It is what we use to buy things. It has value because everyone agrees it has value. It is backed by the government. All of that is approximately true.
But it is incomplete in a way that is absolutely central to understanding how money moves at the speed it moves. Here is the more precise answer. Modern money is, at its core, a liability, a debt, a claim. Specifically, the money in your bank account is a liability of your bank. When you deposit money, you are not storing it, you are lending it to the bank. The number in your account is the bank's promise to pay that amount back to you on demand. It is an IOU. A very reliable, very convenient, very liquid IOU, but an IOU nonetheless. Now here's the part that surprises most people. When a bank makes a loan, when someone takes out a mortgage to buy a house, or a business takes out a credit line to fund its operations, the bank does not take money from its depositors and hand it to the borrower. The bank creates a new deposit. It records a new liability on its books, matched by a new asset in the form of the loan. The money that appears in the borrower's account did not exist before the loan was made. It was created in that moment as an entry in a spreadsheet. This is not a controversial claim. It is the standard description of how modern banking works, confirmed by the Bank of England in a 2014 paper that is about as plainly written as central banking documents ever get. The paper is called Money Creation in the Modern Economy, and it begins with the sentence, "This article explains how the majority of money in the modern economy is created by commercial banks making loans." Roughly 90 to 95% of the money supply in most developed economies consists of bank deposits, liabilities in spreadsheets. The physical currency, the paper bills and metal coins, is a tiny rounding error of the total. Why does this matter for our story? Because an IOU does not have physical weight. It does not occupy space. It does not need to be loaded into a container and shipped across an ocean. When money is fundamentally a set of claims recorded in ledgers, and those ledgers are now computerized, the mechanics of moving money are entirely different from the mechanics of moving things. Moving a television requires energy, transport infrastructure, time, and physical presence in space. Moving the financial claim on that television requires changing two numbers in two computer systems. One goes down, one goes up. That operation at its most fundamental level takes milliseconds. This structural reality, money as information, goods as matter, is why the gap between financial speed and physical speed is not a policy choice or a historical accident. It is a consequence of what money is. You could regulate it, you could slow it down through deliberate friction, but you cannot make a bank transfer as slow as a ship. You cannot give money the physics of the things it represents. The physics are different. They will always be different. Now let us talk about the moment when the last physical constraint on monetary speed was removed. For most of the 20th century, there was still a constraint. Under the Bretton Woods system, designed in 1944 at a conference in the mountains of New Hampshire, the US dollar was pegged to gold at $35 per troy ounce. Foreign governments and central banks could present US dollars to the Federal Reserve and receive gold in exchange at that rate. Other major currencies, the British pound, the German mark, the French franc, the Japanese yen, were pegged to the dollar at fixed exchange rates, which meant they were indirectly pegged to gold as well. This system was not perfect. Gold is not a perfect monetary standard. The supply of gold is determined by geology and mining technology, not by the needs of the economy. But it had one significant property. It imposed a physical constraint on the total quantity of dollars that could exist.
You could not create more dollars than the gold in the vault could, in principle, support. And physical constraints mean physical speed limits. Gold cannot be transmitted electronically. It has to be audited, assayed, moved, stored. All of those operations take time. The physical nature of gold created natural friction in the financial system, friction that slowed things down in ways that were sometimes inconvenient, but that also prevented certain kinds of runaway dynamics. By the late 1960s, the Bretton Woods system was under serious strain. The United States was running large fiscal deficits to fund the Vietnam War and the Great Society programs simultaneously. Inflation was rising. Foreign central banks, particularly the French, under Charles de Gaulle, who was philosophically committed to gold and deeply suspicious of what he called the exorbitant privilege of the dollar, were redeeming their dollars for gold at an accelerating rate. The U.S. gold reserves at Fort Knox were declining. On Sunday evening, August 15, 1971, President Nixon appeared on national television. He announced, in a speech that was primarily pitched as an anti-inflation measure, that the United States was suspending the convertibility of the dollar into gold. In a few minutes of television time, the last physical anchor connecting money to a commodity with real-world constraints was severed. The dollar became a fiat currency, backed by the authority of the United States government and the institutional trust of everyone who uses dollars, which is most of the world's major trading relationships. Backed ultimately by the belief that the United States will honor its commitments and that the dollar will continue to be accepted in exchange for real goods and services. The standard story about this moment focuses on the economic mechanics. The Bretton Woods system was unsustainable. The gold peg was increasingly fictional. Nixon ended a polite fiction that everyone in international finance knew could not continue indefinitely. That is all accurate. But here is what that framing tends to gloss over. When you remove the physical anchor, you remove the physical speed limit. The dollar was no longer constrained by the geology of gold. It was constrained only by the institutional decisions of the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government. And institutions can change their decisions much faster than mountains can produce gold. Institutional decisions can, in principle, happen at the speed of policy, at the speed of committees, at the speed of phone calls between Treasury secretaries and central bank governors. And as the institutional constraints were loosened, as capital controls that had been in place since the 1940s were progressively dismantled through the 1970s and 80s, as interest rate ceilings were removed, as restrictions on cross-border capital flows were eliminated, the financial system discovered that its operating speed was limited only by the speed of its technology. And so it invested in the technology. There is a company called Spread Networks. It was founded in 2010 with one purpose: to build a fiber optic cable in an almost perfectly straight line between the financial markets of Chicago and New York. Perfectly straight, meaning it tunneled through mountains and crossed rivers at unconventional angles, because a straight line is shorter than a curve, and shorter means faster. The project cost approximately $300 million. Its only commercial product was, we can transmit your data between Chicago and New York in 13 milliseconds instead of the 17 milliseconds that the existing cables required. 4 milliseconds. $300 million to save 4 milliseconds. The company was profitable because in high-frequency trading, 4 milliseconds is the difference between a profitable execution and a losing one. Algorithms that can act on Chicago futures market prices 4 milliseconds before their competitors see those prices on the New York stock market have an edge that is, in aggregate, worth hundreds of millions of dollars per year. The financial industry was so eager to close even that advantage that within a few years, competitors began building microwave transmission towers, line-of-sight wireless networks that could cut the transmission time to around 8 milliseconds. Further investment pushed towards 7 milliseconds. The pursuit of shorter and shorter fractions of seconds never ends because the value of the advantage never disappears. Meanwhile, the Maersk container ships crossing the Pacific take between 12 and 15 days under ideal conditions. This is faster than 1971, not because of investment in physics-defying technology, because the ships are larger and the supply chains are more efficient. 12 days versus 13 milliseconds. That is the gap. That is what we are dealing with. All right. We know money is fast. We understand structurally why it is fast. Now, let us look at the actual machinery. What does the modern financial system look like when it operates at speed? What are the actual components and how do they interact? The first thing to understand is that most money never actually moves. This sounds like a contradiction, so let me explain. When you use your debit card to pay $6 for a coffee, you might imagine that $6 travels somehow from your bank account to the coffee shop's bank account, some kind of electronic packet moving through the financial infrastructure from one ledger to another. That is not what happens. What happens is that two messages are sent. Your bank receives a message from the card network saying your customer just authorized a payment of $6 to this merchant. The merchant's bank receives a message saying a payment of $6 has been authorized from this customer's card. Both banks record this as a pending item. Neither of them has actually moved any money yet. At the end of the day, or at scheduled intervals, all of the banks that process transactions through a particular network calculate what they owe each other in aggregate.
Your bank's customers may have spent a net total of $400,000 at businesses whose accounts are held at the merchant's bank. The merchant's bank's customers may have spent $200,000 at businesses whose accounts are at your bank. The net figure is $200,000 owed from your bank to the merchant's bank. One transfer, one settlement, covering potentially millions of individual consumer transactions. This process is called netting, and it is one of the most powerful scaling mechanisms in financial history. It means the actual movement of funds is a tiny fraction of the apparent volume of transactions. Without netting, the financial system would need to process and settle each of billions of daily transactions individually. With netting, most transactions simply cancel against each other, and only the residual balances require settlement. Scale this logic up from your morning coffee to the global financial system, and the numbers become hard to process. SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, is the messaging network used by over 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries to communicate payment instructions to each other. SWIFT, to be precise, does not move money, it moves messages. Standardized, secure, authenticated messages that say, please transfer this amount from this account to this account for this stated purpose. SWIFT processes approximately 40 to 45 million messages per day. Those messages instruct the movement of funds totaling somewhere between $5 and $10 trillion daily. The actual settlement of large value transactions between financial institutions in the United States happens through a system called Fedwire, operated by the Federal Reserve. Fedwire is a real-time gross settlement system, meaning each transaction settles individually in real time as it is submitted without netting. It processes roughly $4 trillion per day. To put that in context, $4 trillion per day through a single settlement system in a country whose entire annual GDP is approximately $27 trillion per year. The settlement system processes the equivalent of the entire US economy in less than a week. Now, the foreign exchange market. The global foreign exchange market is the largest financial market on Earth. It has no physical location. There is no exchange, no trading floor, no building you could identify. It is a network of banks, brokers, electronic platforms, and algorithmic systems operating continuously, 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, across every time zone simultaneously. Daily trading volume, approximately $7.5 trillion every day. To appreciate what that number means, the entire annual economic output of Japan, one of the largest economies in the world, a country of 125 million people, the third largest economy by nominal GDP, is approximately $4.2 trillion per year. The Forex market moves more than the annual output of Japan in less than 14 hours. The total annual value of all goods and services traded internationally, every export and import, every cargo ship and air freight, and cross-border digital service in the entire world is roughly $25 trillion per year. That is about $70 billion per day. The foreign exchange market trades more than 100 times that amount every single day. 100 times. The Bank for International Settlements, the most authoritative source on this data, estimates that between 3 and 5% of daily Forex volume is directly related to actual cross-border commercial activity. Companies paying foreign suppliers, travelers exchanging currency, businesses making payroll in multiple currencies. All of the real-world transactions that the Forex market ostensibly exists to facilitate. The other 95+% is financial activity that has no immediate connection to the movement of real goods and services. Trading for profit, speculation on short-term price movements, arbitrage between slightly different prices in different markets, algorithmic strategies placing and canceling thousands of orders per second in pursuit of fractional price advantages, hedging of financial exposures that themselves have no direct connection to physical trade. This is the structure we are dealing with. A financial system that moves 100 times the value of actual trade, primarily to benefit the participants in that system, who profit from the difference between prices, from the interest on loans, from the fees on transactions, from the spreads between bid and ask. None of this is illegal. Most of it is not even particularly controversial in financial circles. It is just the system. The question worth asking, the question we will get to, is whether this is also the best possible system, whether the speed and scale of modern finance serves the economies it operates inside, or whether it increasingly extracts from them.
But before the evaluation, let us go one level deeper into the machinery. Let us talk about derivatives. A derivative is a financial contract whose value is derived from the value of something else. The underlying can be a stock, a bond, a currency, a commodity, an interest rate, a credit event, a weather index, or another derivative. The most common derivatives are futures, options, and swaps. Futures commit both parties to a transaction at a specific price on a future date. Options give one party the right but not the obligation to transact at a specific price. Swaps exchange one stream of cash flows for another, most commonly fixed-rate interest payments for floating-rate ones. These instruments have genuine and important uses in risk management. An airline that buys jet fuel futures is managing the real risk of fuel price volatility on its operating costs. A wheat farmer who sells futures contracts before harvest is protecting herself against the risk of prices falling before she can bring her crop to market. A bank that uses interest rate swaps to convert fixed-rate loans into floating-rate exposure is managing its interest rate risk. These are legitimate, economy-serving uses of derivatives. The modern derivatives market is not primarily composed of these uses. The notional value of all outstanding derivatives contracts globally, the face value, the headline number, is estimated at somewhere between $1 and $2 quadrillion. The figure varies depending on methodology and which categories are included. No single organization tracks it comprehensively. The Bank for International Settlements publishes semi-annual surveys that are the closest thing to authoritative data, and their numbers for exchange-traded and over-the-counter derivatives combined suggest something in the range of $500 trillion to $1,000 trillion, depending on the period and the categories measured. For comparison, total global GDP is approximately $100 trillion. The derivatives market is, by the most common estimates, 5 to 10 times the size of the entire global economy. Now, as mentioned, notional value is not the same as economic exposure. The majority of derivatives offset each other, a short position here, a long position there, netting to a much smaller actual risk. The net exposure figures are substantially lower than the gross numbers. This is true and important, but the gross figures are not meaningless. They tell you about the scale of interconnection, about the chains of mutual obligation that link financial institutions to each other through these contracts, about the complexity of unwinding positions if a major counterparty fails. about how much of the financial system's activity is devoted to managing positions in other financial instruments rather than facilitating real economic activity, and about how fast the financial system can move relative to the physical economy it claims to serve. Let us now talk about what happens when the speed differential between money and goods gets large enough to break things, not theoretically, with specific examples and specific numbers. September 1992. The United Kingdom is a member of the European Exchange Rate Mechanism, the ERM, a system designed to keep European currencies stable against each other in preparation for eventual monetary union. The pound sterling is pegged in a band relative to the German mark. The peg is under strain. The British economy has entered recession following German reunification, which pushed German interest rates up and pulled capital toward Germany. The UK is stuck. It needs to cut interest rates to stimulate its economy, but cutting rates would weaken the pound and break the ERM peg. The Bank of England has been defending the pound for months, spending foreign exchange reserves to buy pounds and keep the price from falling below the floor of the band. Currency traders, and most prominently George Soros's Quantum Fund, have been watching this situation carefully. Their analysis suggests that the UK cannot sustain the defense of the peg indefinitely. At some point, the economic pressure to cut rates will overwhelm the commitment to the exchange rate target. When that happens, the pound will fall. Soros's fund begins accumulating a short position in the pound, borrowing pounds, selling them, betting that the price will fall. By mid-September, the position is approximately $10 billion. Other funds have built similar positions. The total speculative short against the pound is enormous. On September 16, 1992, Black Wednesday, the battle reaches its climax. The UK government and the Bank of England spend the day desperately buying pounds to defend the rate. They raise interest rates to 12%, then to 15%, trying to make it expensive to borrow pounds. They spend approximately $27 billion in foreign exchange reserves. It is not enough. At 7:30 in the evening, the UK government announces its withdrawal from the ERM. The pound is allowed to float. It falls approximately 15% almost immediately. Soros's fund makes roughly $1 billion in a single day. The British government, having spent $27 billion in reserves defending a peg it could not hold, estimates it lost approximately £3.3 billion sterling in the failed defense. The entire engagement lasted less than 12 hours. The financial system moved faster than any democratic government, faster than any deliberative process, faster than any institutional response mechanism designed for human decision-making could operate. One fund with $10 billion in short positions defeated the monetary policy apparatus of a G7 nation. Most British citizens did not know what was happening until it was over. The Asian financial crisis. Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea, Malaysia, the Philippines. Economies that had been the showcase of development economics for a decade, the Asian tigers and their neighbors holding up rapid industrialization as the template for emerging market success. Growth rates of 7, 8, 9% annually. Rising middle classes, expanding manufacturing sectors, praised by the IMF and World Bank as models of sound development. In mid-1997, currency speculators begin testing the Thai baht. Thailand has been running current account deficits, importing more than it exports, funded by foreign capital inflows. The baht is pegged to the US dollar, and the peg requires the Thai central bank to maintain large foreign exchange reserves to defend it. As the deficits accumulate, the reserves begin to look thin relative to the short-term foreign currency debt the country has accumulated. The logic is the same as with the British pound. If the peg is unsustainable, it will eventually break. And if it breaks, the currency will fall. And if the currency falls, everyone who borrowed in US dollars will face dramatically higher repayment costs in local currency terms. Institutions that have short-sold the baht and bought dollars will profit enormously. The Thai central bank spends its reserves defending the baht. On July 2, 1997, it gives up. The baht is allowed to float. it immediately falls by more than 15%. The contagion spreads within days. Not because the underlying economies of Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, and the Philippines are identical to Thailand's, they are not, but because the financial markets that evaluate these currencies are global, fast, and interconnected.
A trader who has just watched the Thai baht collapse looks at the Indonesian rupiah and asks the same question. What is the real value of this peg? What are the reserves relative to the short-term debt? What happens if confidence erodes? The answer for several of these countries was not good. By the end of 1997, the Indonesian rupiah had fallen approximately 80% against the US dollar. The Malaysian ringgit fell more than 40%. The South Korean won fell nearly 50%. When a currency falls 80%, the prices of imported goods, food, medicine, fuel, industrial inputs, increase by factors of 4 and 5. Companies that had taken on dollar-denominated debt, assuming a stable exchange rate, suddenly faced repayment obligations they could not meet in local currency terms. Tens of thousands of businesses went bankrupt. Credit froze. Investment collapsed. The IMF estimated that the crisis caused more than $600 billion in economic damage across the affected countries. In Indonesia, approximately 20 million people fell below the poverty line in a single year. 20 million people. The financial crisis unfolded in months. The human consequences, the poverty, the unemployment, the lost savings, the disrupted development trajectories, persisted for years.
And then, 2008. The most documented financial crisis of recent decades, and the one whose structural logic is most directly relevant to our central theme. The subprime mortgage crisis is usually framed as a story about greed and negligence. Banks made loans to borrowers who could not afford them. Investment banks packaged those loans into securities without disclosing the true risk. Rating agencies gave AAA ratings to instruments that deserved nothing close. Regulators, ideologically committed to the idea that markets self-correct, did not intervene. The whole structure collapsed when the housing market turned. All of that is true, but underneath the human story is a structural story about speed. And it is the structural story that explains why this happens repeatedly in different forms in different countries across different eras. A house in Phoenix, Arizona takes 1 to 2 years to build. The mortgage on that house has a 30-year term. The physical asset, the land, the timber, the concrete, the copper wiring, the drywall, exists in physical space, depreciates slowly, and cannot be replicated with a few keystrokes. The financial instruments built on top of that mortgage can be created, structured, sold, and resold in minutes. A mortgage originates. Within weeks, the originating bank sells it to a securitization vehicle, a specially created legal entity that pools thousands of similar mortgages. The vehicle issues mortgage-backed securities, bonds whose interest payments are funded by the mortgage payments flowing in from thousands of borrowers. These are sold to institutional investors. The riskier tranches of these mortgage-backed securities, the portions most exposed to default, are pooled together and repackaged into collateralized debt obligations.
CDOs, new securities, one layer further removed from the underlying house and the actual borrower, sold to other institutional investors. The riskiest tranches of the CDOs are sometimes pooled into CDO squareds, a third level of abstraction. And credit default swaps, essentially insurance policies that pay out if the underlying instruments default, are written and traded on top of all of it by counterparties who may have no connection to any of the underlying mortgages. By the time a single 30-year mortgage in Phoenix has been fully processed through this chain, it is embedded in financial instruments that have changed hands dozens of times across counterparties in New York, London, Frankfurt, Tokyo, and Singapore, most of whom have never seen the original loan document and most of whom could not tell you whether the underlying borrower was a school teacher with a fixed income or a property speculator with 5 simultaneous mortgages and no documentation of income. The house was slow. The claim on the house was fast. The claims on the claims on the claims were moving at the speed of institutional investor appetite. When the underlying borrowers began defaulting in significant numbers, When the housing market that had been universally described as incapable of a nationwide decline did, in fact, decline nationally, the speed of the financial system turned against itself. Investors attempted to exit their positions simultaneously. Prices in markets that had been described as liquid became illiquid almost overnight. The netting assumptions that made the derivatives market manageable depended on orderly, sequential unwinding. Under simultaneous pressure, those assumptions broke. Counterparty risk, the question of whether the entity on the other side of your trade would be able to pay, became unquantifiable because nobody could figure out who held what exposure through what chain of securitization. The financial system froze. Not because of one bad actor or one bad decision, because speed does not care about direction. It amplifies bullish dynamics and bearish dynamics with equal efficiency. When the trend reversed, the amplification worked on the downside with the same force it had previously worked on the upside. 8 million Americans lost their jobs in the recession that followed. 10 million lost their homes. The institutional financial system, the banks, the markets, the clearinghouses, was stabilized through government bailouts and Federal Reserve emergency lending over roughly 2 years. Many of the families who lost their homes are still renting today. Their wealth, which for most American families is primarily held in home equity, has never recovered to where it would have been on the pre-crisis trajectory. The financial system healed at financial speed. The human consequences settled at human speed, or did not settle at all.
At this point in the video, if you have been following along, you might be thinking this cannot be the whole story. Surely someone, at some point, ran through these dynamics and concluded that the benefits outweigh the costs. Surely the current system was not simply imposed on the world by people who wanted crises to happen. And you would be right to think that. There is a serious, well-developed, thoroughly reasoned defense of the current financial architecture. It is not cynical propaganda. It reflects genuine intellectual engagement with the trade-offs involved. Let me give it to you as fairly as I can. The argument goes like this. Modern economies require vast, ongoing investment to function and grow. Companies need capital to build factories, develop technologies, hire workers, and expand into new markets. Governments need to borrow to fund infrastructure and social programs during economic downturns. Households need credit to buy homes, fund education, and smooth consumption across periods of irregular income. All of this requires financial intermediation, the process of connecting savers with borrowers, of channeling capital from those who have more than they currently need to those who can use it productively. Deep, liquid, efficient financial markets make this intermediation cheap. When capital markets function well, a company can issue a bond and raise $1 billion in a few days at a competitive interest rate. Without well-functioning capital markets, that same company might spend months negotiating with individual lenders and pay substantially more for the capital it needs. Lower cost of capital means more investment. More investment means more job creation, more technological development, higher productivity. This is not a fringe position. This is the standard model of how finance contributes to economic growth, and there is substantial empirical evidence supporting it in the historical record, particularly in comparisons between economies with deep capital markets and economies without them. The fast-moving, highly liquid, highly interconnected financial system we have built is, on this view, the infrastructure of prosperity. The high-frequency traders, the currency speculators, the hedge funds running arbitrage strategies, they are providing liquidity, making it easy and cheap for real businesses to hedge their risks and raise capital. The derivatives market that seems absurdly large and disconnected from reality is, on this view, the mechanism by which interest rate risk and currency risk and credit risk get distributed from those who cannot manage it to those who can. This is the defense. It is serious, it is supported by serious economists, and in its broad outlines, it captures something real about how financial markets work. But the defense is a theory. The question is whether it matches the data. And when you look at what actually happened in the economies that most aggressively adopted financial deregulation and capital mobility, primarily the United States and the United Kingdom through the 1980s and 1990s, the data tells a more complicated story. Consider corporate investment. The theory predicts that deeper, more efficient capital markets will direct more savings toward productive investment. Factories, equipment, research, and infrastructure, the things that raise real output and real wages over time. In the United States, corporate investment as a share of GDP was robust through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Companies built things, they invested in physical capital. From the 1980s onward, as financial deregulation accelerated and capital markets deepened, something unexpected happened. Corporate investment as a share of GDP stagnated. The relationship between corporate profits and capital expenditure weakened. Companies became systematically more likely to return profits to shareholders through dividends and buybacks than to invest them in expanding physical capacity. Buybacks, corporations purchasing their own stock to reduce the number of shares outstanding and thereby increase earnings per share, were effectively prohibited in the United States until 1982, when the SEC adopted Rule 10b-18, which created a safe harbor for buybacks. Within a decade, buybacks had become a standard tool of financial management. By 2018, S&P 500 companies were spending approximately $800 billion annually on their own shares. In the same year, total U.S. corporate research and development spending was approximately $350 billion. Companies were spending more than twice as much on financial engineering of their stock price as on developing the next generation of products and technologies. This is not necessarily irrational behavior. If executive compensation is heavily tied to stock price performance, and it is, increasingly so since the 1980s, then actions that raise stock price are rewarded. Buybacks raise stock price in the short term by reducing the denominator in earnings per share calculations. Building a factory that takes 3 years to complete and 5 years to pay off does not improve this quarter's earnings per share. The financial system efficiently generates the incentives it generates. The question is whether those incentives align with what we actually want an economy to do. The second tension in the defense involves the claim that fast capital allocation is efficient capital allocation. That money, free to move quickly across borders and between asset classes, finds its way to the highest value uses. This argument requires that the people moving the money have accurate information about where the highest value use actually is. And the historical record of fast capital is not a record of consistently accurate information processing. It is partly a record of herding, of momentum, of markets in which the most profitable short-term strategy is not to correctly assess fundamental value, but to correctly predict what everyone else is about to do. John Maynard Keynes described this in 1936, decades before computers or algorithmic trading existed, using the metaphor of a newspaper beauty contest. Competitors are asked to pick the 6 prettiest faces from 100 photographs, but the prize goes not to the competitor who picks the faces he personally finds most attractive, but to the competitor whose choices most closely match the average preference of all competitors. The optimal strategy is not to pick who you think is most beautiful, it is to predict who everyone else thinks is most beautiful, and then to predict who everyone else thinks is most beautiful. The exercise is entirely self-referential. It has nothing to do with any objective quality of the faces being evaluated.
Modern financial markets operate with this logic, running at microsecond speeds, with billions of dollars of technology dedicated to being fractionally faster than the next participant in predicting what everyone else will do.
When collective sentiment is aligned with reality, when the things being bid up in price genuinely are worth more, this system is extraordinarily efficient at processing that information. When collective sentiment diverges from reality, when a narrative takes hold that has no fundamental basis, the system is equally efficient at processing and amplifying that wrong information. The speed does not discriminate, it just moves. The result is a financial system that is extremely good at certain things and unreliable at others, and the things it is unreliable at tend to generate very large, very concentrated costs when they fail. Part 8. Step back from the specific numbers and the specific crises. Think about the structure itself. Every functioning economy consists of two overlapping systems. There is the real economy, the agricultural systems, manufacturing sectors, service industries, logistics networks, research and development pipelines, and the billions of workers, managers, farmers, engineers, and entrepreneurs who make them operate. This is the system that produces the actual goods and services that people live inside. It moves at human speed. It is constrained by physics, biology, the time it takes to build skills and infrastructure and relationships. And there is the financial system, the banks, markets, clearinghouses, settlement systems, and the entire ecosystem of instruments, institutions, and algorithms that sit on top of the real economy and purport to serve it. The theory says the financial system is infrastructure. It exists to serve the real economy, to channel savings into investment, to distribute risk, to facilitate trade, to coordinate economic activity across space and time. Like roads or electrical grids, valuable not in themselves, but because of what they enable. That was historically approximately true. The modern situation looks different. Global financial assets, stocks, bonds, bank deposits, derivatives, are estimated at somewhere between 5 and 10 times global GDP. The finance and insurance sector in the United States accounts for roughly 7 to 8% of GDP, larger than the entire manufacturing sector while employing about 4% of the workforce. The finance sector's share of total corporate profits has been significantly above its share of economic output for decades. The financial system is not infrastructure in the roads and ports sense. It is an industry, one that operates with its own internal logic, driven by incentives that were designed to serve the broader economy, but that have, in many cases, evolved away from that purpose. The economist and former IMF chief economist Raghuram Rajan wrote in his 2010 book, Fault Lines, that the financial sector has become too large for the benefits it provides to justify the risks it generates. The economist Adair Turner, former chairman of the UK Financial Services Authority, made a similar argument in his book 2015, Between Debt and the Devil, that much of what the financial sector does is socially useless in the sense that it redistributes wealth without creating it. These are not fringe arguments. These are serious economists with serious credentials making serious cases that the financial sector beyond a certain size becomes a drag on the economies it is supposed to serve. And the speed differential is central to how this happens. When financial claims move faster than the things they represent, you create persistent conditions for mispricing. The financial system and the real economy can diverge significantly before correction occurs. And when correction comes in a fast financial system, it comes fast and hard. There is a concept in physics called resonance. Every system has a natural frequency at which it vibrates. If you drive a system at a frequency it cannot absorb, the oscillations grow until the system fails. This has happened to bridges, to mechanical systems, to buildings and earthquakes. Think about the speed differential as a resonance problem. The financial system can change state, can move from euphoria to panic, from expansion to contraction in days or weeks. The real economy changes state in months or years. Supply chains take time to rebuild. Workers take time to retrain. Companies take time to restructure. Trust takes time to restore. When the financial system drives the real economy at financial speed, when credit expands and contracts at rates that the real economy cannot match, the oscillations between boom and bust get larger over time, not smaller. The financial system amplifies economic cycles rather than stabilizing them. This is what economists call pro-cyclicality, and it is one of the most well-documented and consistently observed features of modern financial systems. The Bank for International Settlements has been writing about it for 30 years. The IMF has flagged it in multiple financial stability assessments. It is not a secret insight, it is a known feature of the system. The system has not changed. Part of the reason for that is institutional inertia. Financial systems are extraordinarily difficult to reform because they are extraordinarily complex. Changes in one part of the system create unintended consequences in others. Regulators are always playing catch-up with innovations that move faster than regulatory frameworks.
But part of the reason is simpler. The people who benefit most from the current arrangement are also the people with the most access to the policymakers who might change it. This is not a conspiracy. It is how concentrated economic interests operate in democratic systems. A financial industry with hundreds of billions of dollars in annual profits has strong incentives to maintain the conditions that generate those profits. Diffuse interests, working households, small businesses, communities dependent on stable employment, have weaker organizational capacity to push for structural reform. This dynamic is not specific to finance. It appears wherever concentrated economic interests intersect with regulatory policy. But in finance, the stakes are particularly high because the financial system is the infrastructure of everything else. When it malfunctions, the consequences are not contained within the industry, they spread. So, back to the shipping container. 40 feet of steel, 340 televisions, 28 days across an ocean that does not care about anyone's schedule. Back to the phone call, 4 minutes and 20 seconds, $40 million, 3 continents. An agreement between institutions that believe in each other's promises. That gap has not narrowed since 1971. It has widened, dramatically, continuously. At every step, the investment in financial speed has outrun the investment in physical logistics. Fiber optic cables through mountains, microwave towers across flatlands, co-location of servers inside exchange data centers to shave microseconds. The pursuit of financial speed has been relentless because speed translates directly into competitive advantage, and competitive advantage translates directly into profit. Meanwhile, the shipping containers are larger, the supply chains are more optimized, the ports are more automated, and the crossing still takes 12 to 15 days because the Pacific Ocean is still 8,000 miles wide, and physics is still not negotiating. The gap is structural, it is permanent, it is not going to close. The question is not whether we can close it, the question is what we decide the gap means. We have built a system that is extraordinary at what it does. It moves extraordinary volumes of abstract claims at extraordinary speeds. It connects borrowers with lenders across hemispheres in milliseconds. It allows risks to be hedged and distributed in ways that were literally inconceivable 50 years ago. It has genuinely and measurably contributed to economic growth and the reduction of poverty in many parts of the world. And it generates crises regularly, with a predictability that, once you understand the structure, is not surprising at all. It generates crises because it was optimized for speed inside a physical world that moves slowly, because it was optimized for financial returns inside an economy that needs stability as well as returns, because it was optimized for the people who operate it inside a society that also contains the people who depend on it from the outside. In every crisis, the financial system recovers. It is recapitalized. It is reformed partially. It returns to operation slightly changed.
The people who lost their jobs, their homes, their savings, their businesses, they recover too. Some of them. Others do not. For many, the recovery takes longer than the financial system requires, and some of them do not live to see it. We built a system that moves at the speed of light and placed it inside a world that moves at the speed of life. The question we have not finished answering is, what do we owe the people who can only live at one of those speeds?